maybe a collaborative effort. Take us through how this all works and what comes before what in terms of legislation, going to the bond market, which entity goes to the bond market, when the money comes in, and when we know which projects are sped up.
Okay, John, do you want to take a crack at that, or Greg Murphy? And I also think Matt Carl is important here. If he gets his coat off, he can come on up and say something about all this as well.
I guess I would just start and say that we're still working through a lot of those aspects. We have outlined through our analysis and through the work that's been done with the consultant and advisor that's been hired. So there's a lot more work to do. You've got other entities that we've got to work with, rating agencies and things such as that. So we're just starting this process now. So I think there's a lot more to come.
What's Jobs Ohio's role? Are you going to work with? I believe the Turnpike Commission is actually the entity that's going to seek the additional debt.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with Jobs Ohio.
Well, let me answer that. Look, we operate as a team. It's like in an operating room in a complicated procedure. I mean, this is the way you should come to the office, and no, you're not going to come to the office. But it's not unusual for us to have 15, 20 people sitting around, everybody having input. I mean, it is a wide open operation, but with people who are really smart. So you would not want to not have a guy who spent many, many years of his life working on complicated financial transactions, which is exactly what John has done. Not just debt and equity, but things like reverse Morris trusts and things that are extremely complicated. But he understands the markets, he understands the rating agencies. But that doesn't take anything away from Greg Murphy, who works on this, or Matt Carl, who's got not only great legislative ideas, but good, deep legal knowledge. So, Joe, the way it works is everybody's in the room, and then, of course, Rick here, he's the one that has to execute all this, so he's got his input. So they basically do planning meetings around a big table and try to figure this out. So when we hired KPMG, which was another decision that took a process of figuring out who we were going to hire, and that was complicated as well, they come up with a series of recommendations. We met in the cabinet room with 3 choices: a sale, a lease, or this bonding. And as soon as I looked at it, I said, "Well, we're going to bond because we get to keep the asset." We really don't know at the long run what this is worth in terms of beyond what we've already stated. And we know we're going to get the $1 billion, and then with any operational improvements. And I heard yesterday that the Turnpike actually pays the Highway Patrol a chunk of money to patrol the Turnpike, okay? But the bottom line is, with operational efficiencies, there's more money out there, plus you retain the value of that asset, and you can constantly be able to raise dollars and bring dollars forward to run. So that's how we made that decision. In terms of the legislative procedure, Matt, you want to say anything about this? You come up here, though.
In terms of legislation, did you ask a question, Jeff? Yes, sir. In terms of legislation, we've identified bill sponsors already. We are working on drafting the legislation, beginning to work on drafting the legislation. That will not be done probably until mid-January. And once we have that done, we're going to have to all sit down and review it and take a look at it, and then we'll move forward with there. We hope to introduce it maybe separately from the transportation budget and get it done quickly.
Does the new bonds, are they contingent on this legislation, or can the Turnpike Commission get going on the bonding aspect of this?
No, we have to pass legislation before the bonds would be sold.
Okay.
It's important we move quickly because we have a favorable bond market. This is the time to do it. So they were talking about putting the transportation bill. Maybe we will. There's also discussions about maybe it goes dual track. Who knows? But the quicker we get it done, the sooner, and the less squabbling and all that. The quicker we can get this done and get the best price we can for these bonds.
Governor,
yeah.
Roughly how many of the 65,000 will be short-term or temporary jobs? And since construction workers often move around the country for large-scale projects, how do you ensure that those are Ohioans?
Well, that's what Mark Topman's here to do. I mean, we're already raising cane, and we're getting some progress with the energy companies. I made a statement the day we welcomed the Buckeyes into the Lincoln Room, and I know that the companies have become much more aggressive in terms of working with us since we pointed this out. And so, Mark, how about a word from you about the way this you will call your workers together?
Basically, in the highway industry, we have all of the contractors that do the highway industry. So, as you see with the highway work going on now, these are Ohio people. We are a statewide local, so our people can travel from Cleveland to Columbus to Cincinnati, Dayton, and most of the crafts are set up that way. As soon as they call tomorrow morning for 100 workers, we have 100 workers in the morning. That's how that will work with the highway. It's a whole total different industry than the gas and oil industry. This, we have basically, you will see probably 100% of Ohioans working on these roads.
In the estimated number that would be short-term temporary?
Well, they say, for $1 billion in the highway industry, they say, it's gone from 30-some thousand workers to 40. It just fluctuates in there. Plus, that's not your spin-off jobs. Every time you build roads, businesses come. That's why jobs in Ohio ought to be here, because businesses come. When you got better roads, you got better commerce, you got everything moves. That's where we've been stagnant for the last few years, is not fixing our infrastructure, not doing the things. We're talking about other issues instead of the roads that we already have, the assets that we have that will bring businesses to the state.
Last
Well, I know what I'm saying.
I'm just trying to understand how the 65,000 breaks down.
Well, it's going to be 65,000 building, and then, beyond that, I mean, how many of them are going to be permanent once the road's done? They probably move on to another road, and we've got a building project here for a long, long time. That's what's exciting. And then I'm looking out the window, and I see the scrambler out here, and then there's a bank out here, and that means that the construction workers come in and they build that once the road is fixed. So it leads to, it's a multiplier effect whenever you have a good transportation system. I'll give you a good example. We've invested in North Baltimore, Ohio. Why? Because trains can come in and change their cargo out to other trains or trucks up in North Baltimore, which is just south of Toledo. And it gives them what's called a multimodal. Now, they can either go through Chicago or they can go through North Baltimore. As I like to say, if you go to O'Hare and you're 18, you may be ready for Social Security by the time you fly out. So they would prefer to come through North Baltimore. North Baltimore is going to be exploding with businesses. I mean, with restaurants and hotels and it's going to be fantastic. That's why we built that road up there in 2 years that they said it was going to take 7. Jerry did a heck of a job. So think of it as a bigger deal, sort of like oil and gas. Oil and gas is not just about drilling. It's about the accompanying businesses that are connected to it. It's also about the fact that there's spin-offs to that, and it's the same thing. The things are not static. They're very growth. Yes?